A struggling veteran thought he'd lost everything. Then he met a kind-hearted biker at a gas station. Jack Thompson had always been a fighter. Growing up in a small town in rural Ohio, he learned early on that life was a series of battles, some big, some small, but all requiring grit and determination. It was this mindset that led him to join the United States Army right out of high school, eager to serve his country and make something of himself. During his 15 years of service, Jack saw more than his fair share of combat. He completed 4 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, earning multiple commendations for his bravery and leadership. But the horrors of war left their mark on the seasoned soldier. The constant threat of IEDs, the loss of fellow soldiers, and the weight of split-second decisions that meant life or death took their toll on Jack's psyche and body. When an IED explosion left him with a severe back injury and partial hearing loss, Jack was medically discharged from the Army. He returned home to Ohio a changed man, struggling with chronic pain, PTSD, and the deafening silence of a life without purpose. The transition to civilian life was far from smooth. Jack's marriage, already strained by his long deployments, crumbled under the weight of his post-war struggles. His wife, unable to cope with his mood swings and nightmares, left him, taking their 2 young children with her. The divorce depleted what little savings he had, and his disability payments barely covered the basics. Jobs were hard to come by for a man with his limitations, both physical and mental. He bounced from one part-time gig to another, never quite finding his footing in the civilian world. The skills that had made him an exceptional soldier seemed to have little value in small-town Ohio. As the months turned into years, Jack felt himself slipping further into despair. The proud soldier who had once led men into battle now struggled to get out of bed most days. His small apartment became both a sanctuary and a prison, littered with reminders of a life that no longer existed. Faded photographs of happier times, dusty medals that had once shone with promise. On a particularly bad day, 5 years after his discharge, Jack found himself sitting in his beat-up old truck, staring at the empty fuel gauge and the last $5 in his wallet. He had a job interview in the next town over, a last-ditch attempt to turn his life around. But with no gas and barely enough money to fill the tank, even this small hope seemed out of reach. Little did Jack know that as he pulled into the local gas station, his life was about to take an unexpected turn. The neon lights of Joe's Gas and Go flickered weakly in the early morning gloom as Jack eased his decrepit pickup truck into the station. The old vehicle groaned in protest, the fuel gauge dipping below empty, as if to emphasize the direness of the situation. Jack sat there for a moment, his calloused hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to summon the energy to face another day of disappointment. With a heavy sigh, he grabbed the crumpled $5 bill from the dashboard, his last bit of cash until the next disability check came through. It wasn't enough to get him to the job interview, but it was all he had. As he stepped out of the truck, a twinge of pain shot through his back, a constant reminder of the IED that had ended his military career. The cool morning air bit at his skin as he limped towards the pump. The station was deserted, save for a lone motorcycle parked near the storefront, its chrome gleaming even in the dim light. Jack couldn't help but admire the machine, remembering the feeling of freedom he'd once felt on his own bike, before he'd been forced to sell it to pay for groceries. As he reached for the pump, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over him. The world tilted sideways, and Jack stumbled, his bad leg giving out beneath him. He braced himself for the impact with the concrete, but it never came. Instead, he felt a strong grip on his arm, steadying him. "Whoa there, brother," a deep voice rumbled. "I've got you." Jack blinked, his vision clearing to reveal a large man with a salt-and-pepper beard and leather vest. The stranger's arms were covered in tattoos, one of which Jack recognized as the insignia of the 101st Airborne Division. "You all right?" the man asked, concern evident in his voice. Jack nodded, embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "Yeah, just lost my balance for a second. Thanks for the save." The man studied Jack for a moment, taking in his worn clothes and the haunted look in his eyes. "No problem. Name's Mike. You look like you could use a cup of coffee. Why don't you join me inside?" Jack hesitated. Pride warred with the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. It had been days since he'd had a proper meal. "I appreciate the offer, but I've got to get some gas and hit the road." "Job interview," he explained, holding up the wrinkled $5 bill. Mike's eyes narrowed, taking in the old truck and the meager amount of cash. "Tell you what," he said, reaching for his wallet. "Let me fill up your tank. Consider it a thank you for your service." Jack's first instinct was to refuse. He'd had his fill of pity and handouts, but something in Mike's eyes stopped him. Not pity, but understanding. The look of one soldier to another. "I can't accept that," Jack said, his voice rough with emotion. Mike smiled, a warm, genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Sure you can, and you will, because one day when you're back on your feet, you'll do the same for another brother in need. That's how we take care of our own." Before Jack could protest further, Mike was already swiping his card at the pump. As the numbers on the display ticked upward, Jack felt a lump form in his throat. It had been so long since anyone had shown him such kindness. "Now," Mike said as he replaced the nozzle, "how about that coffee? I've got some time before I need to head out, and I'd love to hear about your service, if you're willing to share." Jack looked at his watch. The interview wasn't for a couple of hours, and the prospect of conversation with someone who might understand was tempting. "All right," he agreed, "but at least let me buy the coffee. It's the least I can do." Mike chuckled, clapping Jack on the shoulder. "Deal. And who knows, maybe I might know of a job opportunity that'd be perfect for a fellow vet." As they walked towards the station's small diner, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in years. A glimmer of hope. He didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter at a gas station was about to change the course of his life. As Jack and Mike settled into a booth in the small diner attached to the gas station, the aroma of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air. Jack couldn't remember the last time he'd sat down for a proper meal, let alone shared one with someone else. The waitress, a kind-faced woman named Betty, brought over 2 steaming mugs of coffee and menus. "Order whatever you want," Mike said, waving off Jack's protests. "I insist." As they waited for their food, Mike and Jack fell into an easy conversation about their military experiences. Jack found himself opening up about his struggles since returning home, surprised at how easily the words flowed. There was something about Mike's presence that put him at ease, a shared understanding that went beyond words. "So tell me about this job interview," Mike said as their plates arrived, piled high with eggs, bacon, and hash browns. Jack sighed, pushing his food around with his fork. "It's for a warehouse position. Probably won't get it, though. Not many places willing to take a chance on a broken-down vet with PTSD and a bad back." Mike's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You know, I might have a better opportunity for you. I run a custom motorcycle shop in town. We specialize in building and modifying bikes for veterans, especially those with disabilities." Jack's interest was piqued, but he tried not to let his hope show too much. "That sounds great, but I don't know the first thing about building motorcycles." Mike chuckled. "Neither did I when I started, but you've got skills, Jack. Leadership, attention to detail, ability to work under pressure, all things the military taught us. The rest we can teach you." As Mike spoke, Jack felt a spark of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. Working with motorcycles, being around other veterans, it sounded like a dream. "But why would you do this for me?" Jack asked, still skeptical. "You don't even know me." Mike's expression turned serious. "Because when I came back from my last tour, I was in a similar place, felt like I'd lost everything. Then a Vietnam vet gave me a chance, taught me the trade. Now I'm paying it forward." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table to Jack. "Veterans Room, Motorcycle Therapy for the Soul," it read. "We're more than just a bike shop," Mike explained. "We're a support system, a brotherhood. We've got counselors on staff, job training programs, the works. It's about giving vets a purpose again, a reason to keep pushing forward." Jack stared at the card, his vision blurring with unexpected tears. The possibility of a new beginning, of being part of something meaningful again, was almost overwhelming. I don't know what to say," Jack stammered. Mike smiled, reaching across the table to clasp Jack's shoulder. "Say you'll come by the shop this afternoon. Forget the warehouse interview. Come meet the team, see what we're all about. No pressure, just an opportunity. As Jack nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat, he realized that this chance encounter had given him something he'd lost long ago: hope. The road ahead might still be challenging, but for the first time in years, Jack felt like he had a direction, a purpose. He looked down at the business card in his hand, then back up at Mike, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you," he said simply, those two words carrying the weight of years of struggle and newfound hope. Mike nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's what brothers are for. As Jack left the diner with Mike, his mind was reeling from the unexpected turn of events. The weight of the business card in his pocket felt like both a lifeline and a challenge. Could he really start over? Did he dare to hope for a better future? "I'll see you at the shop this afternoon," Mike asked as they stood in the parking lot. Jack hesitated for a moment, old fears and doubts bubbling up. But as he looked at Mike's expectant face and thought about the opportunity being offered, he made a decision. "Yeah," he said, his voice growing stronger. "Yeah, I'll be there." Mike's face split into a wide grin. "Excellent. We start you on the right path today, brother." As Jack watched Mike roar away on his motorcycle, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He climbed into his truck, now with a full tank of gas, and headed home to change for his visit to Veterans Vroom. The consequences of Jack's decision began to unfold almost immediately. As he walked into his apartment to change clothes, he noticed things he'd been overlooking for months. The pile of unpaid bills on the table, the empty beer cans littering the floor, the general state of disarray that mirrored his inner turmoil. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of shame about his living conditions, and with it, a desire to change. He spent the next hour cleaning up. Not just changing his clothes, but also tidying his space. It was a small act, but it felt significant, a first step towards reclaiming control over his life. As Jack drove to the motorcycle shop that afternoon, he felt a nervousness he hadn't experienced since his early days in the Army. The shop was located in an industrial part of town, a large warehouse with Veterans Vroom painted in bold letters across the front. The parking lot was filled with motorcycles of all types, and the sound of engines and classic rock spilled out from the open garage doors. Taking a deep breath, Jack stepped inside. The interior was a bustling hive of activity. Veterans of all ages were working on bikes, chatting, and laughing. The walls were adorned with military memorabilia and inspirational quotes. It felt more like a community center than a typical repair shop. Mike spotted Jack and waved him over. "Glad you made it. Let me introduce you to the crew." Over the next couple of hours, Jack met dozens of veterans, each with their own story of struggle and redemption. He was introduced to counselors, job trainers, and skilled mechanics. The more he saw and heard, the more he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced since leaving the Army. Towards the end of the tour, Mike brought Jack to a battered old Harley in the corner of the shop. "This is going to be your project," Mike said. "We'll teach you how to restore it from the ground up. By the time you're done, you'll have marketable skills and a bike of your own." Jack ran his hand over the rusted gas tank, seeing not just a broken-down machine, but a metaphor for his own life. Battered and neglected, but with the potential for restoration. "I don't know if I can do this," Jack admitted, his old doubts surfacing. Mike put a hand on his shoulder. "You can, and you will, but you've got to commit, Jack. This isn't just about learning to fix bikes. It's about fixing yourself. Are you ready for that?" Jack looked around the shop, at the community of veterans who had found purpose and camaraderie here. He thought about his empty apartment, his estranged children, the years he'd lost to depression and alcohol. Then he looked at the old Harley, waiting for a second chance at life. "I'm ready," he said, surprised by the firmness in his voice. Mike smiled. "Good. Be here tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp. We've got work to do." As Jack left the shop that evening, he felt a mix of emotions he couldn't quite sort out. There was hope, certainly, but also fear. He was stepping into the unknown, committing to a path of recovery that would likely be as challenging as it was rewarding. On the drive home, Jack made two difficult but necessary phone calls. The first was to cancel his warehouse job interview. The second, which took all of his courage, was to his ex-wife. He didn't ask to speak to the kids. He wasn't ready for that yet. But he did leave a message explaining that he was starting a new job and was committed to getting his life back on track. That night, as Jack lay in bed, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose, of forward momentum. The road ahead would be tough, he knew. Recovery, both physical and mental, was never easy. Learning new skills at his age would be a challenge. Rebuilding relationships, especially with his children, might be the hardest task of all. But for the first time in a long time, Jack was ready to face those challenges head-on. As he drifted off to sleep, his mind was filled not with the usual nightmares of war, but with dreams of a restored Harley and a life reclaimed. As weeks turned into months, Jack's life began to transform in ways he never could have imagined. His days at Veterans Room were filled with purpose and camaraderie as he threw himself into learning the intricacies of motorcycle mechanics and restoration. The work was challenging, often frustrating, but deeply satisfying. With each part he fixed or replaced on his Project Harley, Jack felt like he was rebuilding a piece of himself. But Jack's journey of recovery extended beyond the walls of the motorcycle shop. Mike had made it clear from the start that working at Veterans Room meant committing to a holistic recovery program. This included regular counseling sessions, group therapy with other veterans, and a structured physical therapy regimen to address Jack's chronic pain issues. At first, Jack was resistant to the idea of therapy. He'd tried it before, shortly after his discharge, and found it unhelpful. But the counselor at Veterans Room, Dr. Sarah Martinez, had a different approach. She was a veteran herself, having served as a combat psychologist in Iraq. Her understanding of military culture and the unique challenges faced by veterans helped Jack open up in ways he never had before. Through his sessions with Dr. Martinez, Jack began to confront the trauma and guilt he'd been carrying since his time in combat. He started to understand that his PTSD and depression weren't signs of weakness, but natural responses to the extreme situations he'd faced. Slowly, he began to develop coping mechanisms and strategies to manage his symptoms. Parallel to Jack's personal growth, a secondary plot began to unfold at Veterans Room. The shop had always operated on a shoestring budget, relying heavily on donations and volunteer work. But as word spread about their success in helping veterans like Jack, the demand for their services grew exponentially. Mike found himself struggling to keep up with the influx of new veterans seeking help, while also trying to secure the funding needed to expand their operations. He began spending long hours writing grant proposals and meeting with potential donors, often at the expense of his own well-being. Jack noticed the toll it was taking on his mentor. Mike, always the pillar of strength, was starting to show signs of stress and exhaustion. It was a role reversal that Jack hadn't expected. Now it was his turn to offer support to the man who had given him a second chance. One evening, after most of the other veterans had left for the day, Jack found Mike slumped over his desk, surrounded by paperwork. "Hey boss," Jack said softly, "maybe it's time to call it a night?" Mike looked up, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Can't stop now, Jack. We're so close to getting that grant from the VA. If we can just expand our program, we could help so many more vets." Jack pulled up a chair, feeling a newfound confidence in his ability to help. "I get it, Mike, but you taught me that recovery is about balance. Maybe it's time we applied that lesson to the shop too?" Over the next few weeks, Jack took on more responsibility at Veterans Room. He started coordinating with other veterans to share the administrative load, organized fundraising events, and even began mentoring some of the newer members, all while continuing his work on his own motorcycle. This secondary plotline not only showcased Jack's growth and ability to give back, but also deepened the sense of community at Veterans Room. The shop was evolving from a place of individual recovery to a true support network, where veterans at different stages of their journey could help and learn from each other. As Jack's Project Harley neared completion, he realized that his journey of recovery was far from over. But now, he had the tools, the support, and the confidence to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And more importantly, he had found a new mission: to help other veterans find the same hope and purpose that Mike and Veterans Room had given him. As Jack's life at Veterans Room flourished, he found himself facing a new challenge: rebuilding the relationships he had neglected during his years of struggle. Chief among these was his relationship with his children, 12-year-old Emma and 9-year-old Tyler. It had been months since Jack had left that tentative voicemail for his ex-wife Lisa. In that time, he had exchanged a few text messages with her, updating her on his progress and asking about the kids, but he hadn't yet found the courage to ask for a face-to-face meeting. One Saturday afternoon, as Jack was polishing the newly restored gas tank of his Harley, Mike approached him with a knowing look. "You know, Jack," he said, leaning against a workbench, "that bike of yours is looking pretty good. Almost ready for a ride, I'd say." Jack nodded, a mix of pride and apprehension in his eyes. "Yeah, just a few more tweaks and she'll be road ready." Mike was quiet for a moment, then said, "You ever think about who you might want to show it to first?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jack's hand stilled on the gas tank, his reflection distorted in the shiny surface. He saw a man who had changed, who had grown, but also a man who still carried the weight of past mistakes. I don't know if I'm ready, Mike," Jack admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Mike put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You've rebuilt this bike from nothing, Jack. You've rebuilt yourself. Don't you think it's time to start rebuilding those relationships too?" That evening, with Mike's words echoing in his mind, Jack made the call he'd been both longing for and dreading. Lisa answered on the third ring, her voice cautious but not unwelcoming. "Jack, is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine," Jack assured her quickly. I was hoping we could talk about me seeing the kids." There was a pause on the other end of the line, long enough for Jack's heart to skip a beat. Then Lisa spoke, her voice softer than before. "I think that would be good, Jack. They've been asking about you." They arranged for Jack to visit the following weekend. The days leading up to the visit were a whirlwind of emotions for Jack. He threw himself into his work at the shop, channeling his nervous energy into the final touches on his motorcycle. When the day finally arrived, Jack rode his newly restored Harley to Lisa's house, the rumble of the engine doing little to drown out the pounding of his heart. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw two small faces peeking out from behind the living room curtain. The reunion was awkward at first. Emma, now on the cusp of teenage years, was reserved, her arms crossed as she regarded her father with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Tyler, however, couldn't contain his excitement at seeing his dad and the shiny motorcycle in the driveway. "Is that yours, Dad?" Tyler asked, his eyes wide with wonder. Jack nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Sure is, buddy. Want to take a closer look?" As Jack showed Tyler the bike, explaining the various parts and how he'd restored them, he noticed Emma slowly edging closer. Her interest piqued despite her efforts to appear indifferent. "You fixed all this yourself?" Emma asked, her voice a blend of skepticism and grudging admiration. "I did," Jack replied, meeting her eyes. "It took a lot of work, and I had to learn a whole lot. But that's kind of been my life lately, learning how to fix things, including myself." Emma's posture softened slightly at his words, and Jack felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The visit lasted a couple of hours, during which Jack shared stories about Veterans Vroom, careful to keep things light and age-appropriate. By the time he was getting ready to leave, both kids seemed more at ease, and even Lisa had a warm smile on her face. "You seem different, Jack," she said as she walked him to his bike. "More present." Jack nodded, understanding the layers in her observation. "I'm trying to be. I know I've got a lot to make up for, but I'm committed to being here for them now, if you'll let me." Lisa studied him for a moment before replying. "One step at a time, Jack, but this was a good start." As Jack rode back to his apartment, he felt a mix of emotions. Joy at reconnecting with his children, regret for the time lost, and determination to keep moving forward. He realized that rebuilding these relationships would be a long process, much like restoring his Harley. It would take time, patience, and consistent effort. Over the next few months, Jack's visits with his children became more frequent. He started attending Tyler's Little League games and Emma's school concerts. Each time, he could feel the invisible wall between them slowly crumbling. At Veterans Vroom, Jack's progress in his personal life seemed to fuel his dedication to helping other veterans. He He started sharing his experiences of reconnecting with his family during group therapy sessions, offering hope to other vets struggling with similar issues. One day, as Jack was working on a particularly challenging bike restoration, Mike approached him with a proposition. "Jack," Mike said, a hint of pride in his voice, "I've been watching you these past few months. The way you've turned your life around, how you're reconnecting with your kids, the work you're doing here, it's impressive." Jack felt a warmth spread through his chest at Mike's words, but he could sense there was more coming. Mike continued, "We're starting a new program here at Veterans Vroom. It's for vets who are a bit further along in their recovery, like yourself. We want them to become mentors for the newer members, to show them that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'd like you to be one of our first mentors." Jack was stunned. He thought back to that day at the gas station, how lost and hopeless he had felt. Now, here he was, being asked to guide others on their journey of recovery. I don't know what to say, Mike," Jack stammered. "Are you sure I'm ready for that kind of responsibility?" Mike smiled, clapping Jack on the shoulder. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you were ready. You've come a long way, Jack. It's time to pay it forward." As Jack considered Mike's offer, he realized how far he had come in rebuilding not just his relationships with his family, but with himself. The thought of helping other veterans find their way back, just as Mike had helped him, filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since his days in the Army. "All right," Jack said, a determined smile spreading across his face. "I'm in. Let's do this." The annual Veterans Vroom charity ride was always the biggest event of the year for the organization, but this year held special significance. It marked the launch of their new mentorship program, and Jack was set to be introduced as one of the lead mentors. The ride would culminate in a ceremony at the local VA hospital, where Veterans Vroom would present a check for the funds raised to support veteran mental health programs. As the day of the ride approached, Jack felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had invited Lisa and the kids to attend the ceremony, hoping to share this important moment with them. It would be the first time they would see him in his element at Veterans Vroom, and he couldn't help but feel that this event could be a turning point in fully reconnecting with his family. The morning of the ride dawned clear and bright. Hundreds of motorcycles lined up outside Veterans Vroom, their chrome gleaming in the early sunlight. Jack, astride his restored Harley, felt a surge of pride as he took his place near the front of the pack next to Mike. As the riders roared through the streets, people lined the sidewalks, cheering and waving flags. Jack felt a lump form in his throat as he saw signs thanking veterans for their service. This wasn't just a ride. It was a statement of support and understanding for those who had served. The route took them past significant local landmarks before heading to the VA hospital. As they neared their destination, Jack's nervousness grew. Would Lisa and the kids be there? How would they react to seeing him in this new role? The bikes pulled into the hospital parking lot, where a stage had been set up for the ceremony. As Jack dismounted, his eyes scanned the crowd, and then he saw them. Lisa, Emma, and Tyler, standing near the front, searching for him. Tyler spotted him first, his face lighting up as he waved excitedly. Emma, trying to maintain her cool preteen demeanor, couldn't hide a small smile. And Lisa? Lisa was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen in years, pride. As Jack made his way to the stage with the other mentors, he felt a sense of coming full circle. Here he was, about to be recognized for his recovery and his commitment to helping others, with his family there to witness it. Mike took the podium, his voice booming over the speakers as he talked about the mission of Veterans Vroom and the impact of their work. And then came the moment Jack had been both anticipating and dreading. "And now," Mike said, "I'd like to introduce one of our new lead mentors, a man who came to us at his lowest point and has since become an inspiration to us all. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jack Thompson." As Jack stepped up to the microphone, the crowd erupted in applause. He looked out at the sea of faces, fellow veterans, supporters, his family, and felt a wave of emotion wash over him. This was more than just a ceremony. It was a testament to how far he had come and a promise of where he was going. Taking a deep breath, Jack began to speak, his voice strong and clear. "A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything. I was a struggling veteran with no hope and no future. But then I met a kind-hearted biker at a gas station, and my life changed forever." As Jack shared his story, the crowd hung on every word. He spoke of his struggles with PTSD, the loss of his family, and the day Mike found him at the gas station. He talked about the journey of rebuilding his life, one motorcycle part at a time, and how the community at Veterans Vroom had become his second family. "But the real heroes," Jack continued, his voice thick with emotion, "are the ones who never gave up on me, my kids Emma and Tyler, who are here today." He paused, making eye contact with them in the crowd. Emma was wiping away tears, while Tyler beamed with pride. And their mom, Lisa, who had every reason to shut the door on me, but instead gave me a chance to make things right. As Jack concluded his speech, the applause was deafening. Mike returned to the podium, presenting the check to the VA hospital representative. But the ceremony wasn't over. Mike had one more surprise. "Jack," he said, turning to face him, "when you first came to us, you were a man who needed help. Today, you stand here as a man who gives help. On behalf of everyone at Veterans Vroom, we'd like to offer you a permanent position as our lead mentor and program coordinator." The crowd erupted in cheers as Jack, overwhelmed, embraced Mike. As he looked out at the sea of faces, his eyes found his family. Lisa was nodding, a tearful smile on her face, while Emma and Tyler were jumping up and down in excitement. In that moment, Jack realized that he had gained far more than he had ever lost. He had found his purpose, rebuilt his family, and discovered a strength within himself that he never knew existed. In the weeks following the charity ride, Jack threw himself into his new role at Veterans Vroom with enthusiasm. The mentorship program was off to a strong start, with more veterans signing up every day. Jack found immense satisfaction in guiding others through the same journey he had traveled, watching as they too began to rediscover hope and purpose. However, as the program grew, new challenges emerged. Some veterans struggled more than others, their trauma deeper, their resistance to change stronger. Jack found himself grappling with the weight of responsibility, the fear of failing those who were counting on him. One veteran in particular, a former Marine named Ray, tested Jack's abilities as a mentor. Ray was angry, volatile, and resistant to every attempt to help him. He reminded Jack painfully of himself in those dark days before he met Mike. After a particularly difficult session where Ray had stormed out, Jack found himself doubting his capabilities. He retreated to the back of the shop, where his restored Harley stood as a testament to how far he'd come. As he ran his hand over the polished chrome, lost in thought, he felt a presence behind him. "Tough day?" Mike's voice was gentle, understanding. Jack nodded, turning to face his friend and mentor. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this, Mike. What if I can't help them? What if I make things worse?" Mike was quiet for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. "You know, Jack, when I first started this place, I had those same doubts. Still do some days. But here's the thing. We're not here to fix anyone. We're here to give them the tools and support they need to fix themselves." "But what about guys like Ray?" Jack asked, frustration evident in his voice. "How do we help someone who doesn't want to be helped?" Mike smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Sometimes the ones who fight the hardest are the ones who need us the most. They're just scared. Scared of hope, because hope can be painful if it's taken away. Your job isn't to force Ray to change. It's to show him that change is possible, that he's not alone, and that it's okay to be scared." Jack pondered Mike's words, realizing that he had been approaching Ray's case from the wrong angle. He had been trying to lead Ray down the same path he had traveled, forgetting that everyone's journey is unique. The next day, when Ray came in for his session, Jack took a different approach. Instead of trying to guide the conversation, he simply listened. He let Ray vent his anger, his frustration, his fear. And when Ray finally fell silent, exhausted from the emotional outpouring, Jack did something unexpected. He handed Ray a wrench. "Come on," Jack said, gesturing to a beat-up old motorcycle in the corner of the shop. "The shop? Let's see if we can get this old girl running." Ray looked confused but followed Jack to the bike. As they worked side by side, Jack shared stories of his own struggles, not as lectures or lessons, but as a way of saying, "I've been there. I understand." Slowly, over the course of several weeks, Ray began to open up. The work on the motorcycle became a metaphor for the work Ray was doing on himself. Taking apart the broken pieces, figuring out what needed to be fixed or replaced, and slowly putting it all back together. As Jack's approach with Ray yielded positive results, he began to apply these lessons to the mentorship program as a whole. He encouraged the other mentors to find unique ways to connect with their mentees, to meet them where they were rather than where they thought they should be. The program evolved, becoming more flexible and individualized. They incorporated art therapy, music workshops, and even a community garden alongside the motorcycle restoration projects. The goal was to provide multiple pathways to healing, recognizing that what works for one veteran might not work for another. As the months passed, Jack saw transformations that amazed him. Veterans who had arrived angry and closed off were now laughing and sharing stories in the shop. Those who had been too depressed to leave their homes were now volunteering in the community. And Ray, the Marine who had challenged Jack so much in the beginning, was now helping to mentor newer members of the program. One evening, as Jack was locking up the shop, he found Ray waiting for him in the parking lot, sitting astride his newly restored motorcycle. "I wanted you to be the first to see her completed," Ray said, a hint of pride in his voice. Jack walked around the bike, admiring the work. "She's beautiful, Ray. You should be proud." Ray nodded, his expression turning serious. "I am. Proud of the bike, yeah, but more than that, I'm proud of myself. For the first time in a long time." He paused, seeming to wrestle with his words. "I wanted to thank you, Jack, for not giving up on me, for showing me that it was okay to hope again." As Ray fired up his bike and rode off into the night, Jack felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He realized that in helping others find their way, he had solidified his own path forward. The conflicts and doubts he had faced were not obstacles to be overcome, but essential parts of the journey, for himself and for every veteran he mentored. The success of Veterans Vroom's expanded programs caught the attention of the national media. A prominent news magazine ran a feature story on the organization, highlighting Jack's journey from struggling veteran to lead mentor. The article went viral, bringing a flood of attention and support to Veterans Vroom. Suddenly, Jack found himself fielding calls from veterans, organizations across the country, all wanting to know how they could implement similar programs in their communities. Politicians reached out, seeking his input on veteran support legislation. Even Hollywood came calling, with a producer interested in turning Jack's story into a movie. The attention was overwhelming, and Jack found himself at a crossroads. Veterans Vroom had given him a second chance at life, had helped him rebuild his relationship with his family, and had shown him the power of community support. Now he had the opportunity to take that message to a national stage. After much soul-searching and long conversations with Mike, Lisa, and his kids, Jack made a decision. He would use this newfound platform to advocate for better support systems for veterans nationwide. But he would do it on his own terms, staying true to the grassroots, community-based approach that had been so crucial to his own recovery. With Mike's blessing, Jack began to develop a plan to create a network of Veterans Vroom chapters across the country. Each chapter would maintain the core principles of motorcycle therapy, peer support, and community engagement, while having the flexibility to adapt to local needs. Jack's new role meant more travel, more public speaking, and less time in the shop. But he made sure to stay connected to his roots, always making time to mentor veterans one-on-one and get his hands dirty working on bikes. As Jack prepared to embark on this new chapter of his life, he reflected on how far he had come. From a hopeless veteran at a gas station to a national advocate for veteran support, it was a journey he never could have imagined. But even as he looked to the future, Jack knew that his most important role would always be at home. He had promised Emma and Tyler that no matter where his new responsibilities took him, he would never miss another important moment in their lives. And as he packed for his first speaking tour, the proudly displayed World's Best Dad mug on his desk served as a constant reminder of that promise. 5 years had passed since that fateful day at the gas station. Jack stood at the podium, addressing a joint session of Congress on veteran mental health and support programs. As he spoke, his eyes scanned the gallery, finding the familiar faces that had been his anchor through this incredible journey. There was Mike, the man who had seen potential in a broken-down vet and given him a chance. Lisa sat next to him, her eyes shining with pride. Emma and Tyler, now teenagers, were beside her, hanging on their father's every word. And at the end of the row sat Ray, now a successful mentor in his own right, at the Veterans Room chapter he had helped establish in his hometown. As Jack concluded his testimony, urging lawmakers to invest in community-based support programs for veterans, he felt a profound sense of how much he had grown. He was no longer defined by his trauma or his past mistakes. Instead, he had become a voice for those still struggling to find their way back from the brink. Later that evening, as the family celebrated over dinner, Jack found a quiet moment to step outside. As he stood there, looking up at the stars, he reflected on the twists and turns his life had taken. He thought about the man he had been 5 years ago, angry, hopeless, pushing away everyone who tried to help him. He remembered the shame he had felt, believing he had failed as a soldier, as a father, as a man. That version of himself seemed like a stranger now. Yet Jack knew he would always carry a piece of that struggle with him. It was a reminder of how far he had come and why his work was so important. Jack's relationship with his children had blossomed over the years. Emma, now applying to colleges, had written her admission essay about her father's journey and how it had inspired her to pursue a career in psychology, focusing on trauma and resilience. Tyler, a budding mechanic, spent every free moment at Veterans Room, learning the trade and bonding with his dad over their shared love of motorcycles. His reconciliation with Lisa had evolved into a deep friendship and co-parenting partnership. While they had not rekindled their romantic relationship, they had found a new level of understanding and respect for each other. Lisa had become one of Veterans Room's strongest advocates, organizing fundraisers and support groups for families of veterans. As Jack stood there under the night sky, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Mike, the man who had changed his life with a simple act of kindness. "Proud of you, son," Mike said, his voice gruff with emotion. Jack smiled, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mike. You saved my life that day at the gas station." Mike shook his head. "I just gave you a push in the right direction. You did the hard work. You saved yourself, Jack. And now, you're saving others." As they stood there in companionable silence, Jack realized that his journey was far from over. There would always be more veterans who needed help, more battles to fight in the halls of Congress, more healing to be done. But he was no longer afraid of the challenges ahead. Jack Thompson, once a struggling veteran who thought he had lost everything, had found his purpose, and in helping others reclaim their lives, he had built a life richer and more fulfilling than he ever could have imagined. As Jack made his way back inside to rejoin his family, he paused at the threshold, taking in the scene before him. His children were laughing with Lisa. Mike was regaling Ray with old stories, and the room was filled with a warmth that went beyond the physical. In that moment, Jack was struck by the power of connection, of community, and of second chances. His journey had taught him that rock bottom could be a foundation on which to rebuild, that vulnerability could be a source of strength, and that every ending had the potential to be a new beginning. The struggles he had faced, the PTSD, the loss of purpose, the fractured relationships, had not disappeared. They were part of him, scars that told the story of where he had been, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they had become the very things that allowed him to connect with and help others. As he rejoined the group, accepting a warm hug from Emma and a fist bump from Tyler, Jack realized that the true measure of his recovery wasn't in the speeches he gave or the programs he started. It was in these moments, being present for his family, being a friend, being a mentor, being the person someone else could lean on when they were lost. The road ahead would have its challenges, but Jack was no longer traveling it alone. He had a family, both biological and chosen, that would be with him every step of the way. And for every veteran still struggling in the darkness, Jack in Veterans Room would be there, a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, and a reminder that it's never too late for a new start.